Hi, good morning, everyone. Today we are going to have Professor Shumita Mita to give a presentation on intelligent biomedical image analysis. She is a full professor at the Machine Intelligence Unit, India Statistical Institute in Calcutta, India. So today is going to be her talk, and if anyone has any question, you can type in the question box, and then I'll ask her after the presentation. And I just want to give an advertise for the next webinar, which is in 4th of March. It's going to be on how to publish an IEEE transaction on fuzzy system. If anyone is interested, you can register for the event first. So now we can listen to Professor Shumita Mita presentation now. So thank you, Professor Mita, to be with us today.
Hello, everybody. From India, it is a very good morning, and it depends where you are. So a very good day or a very good evening. So it is my great pleasure to be talking today in this webinar as a panelist. And the focus of my talk will be on intelligent biomedical image analysis, something that we've been doing in our group for several years over last decade. So it is mainly based on the PhD thesis of one of my students, and so we'll go into the contents of it. So with a brief introduction, we'll go into the standard machine learning based approaches to the automated detection and segmentation of brain tumors from MRIs using saliency, then single seed delineation, thresholding kind of thing. And then with a brief jump to deep learning, we move on to some of the other extensions to deep learning in this work for particularly detection, classification, segmentation, and survival prediction in brain tumor. And finally, a small amount of work that we did recently on COVID-19 screening using X-rays. So the focus of the talk will be on image analysis related to brain tumor MRIs. So it involves intelligent decision making with reference to detection, localization, segmentation, and survival prediction of the patient. And the objective is to provide improved diagnosis, prognosis, and treatment planning towards enhanced tumor management. Now, medicine typically has imperfect knowledge, and that's why you need intelligence, you need computational intelligence. That's why the use of imperfection and modeling of uncertainty is very, very important. Why? Because of the incomplete understanding of biological mechanisms to date, imprecise test measurements, uncertainty of normal ranges of test results, simultaneous presence of more than one disease condition, and possibly missing information. So you need some kind of learning involving intelligent analysis. You need automated analysis in today's big data framework. So you need to assist the medical person. This is in terms of assistive intelligence to handle big data. The objective is not to replace the medical personnel, but to assist, so that in the big data framework, in the automated scenario, we can have more efficient and faster diagnosis and prognosis. And also, we can have some kind of interactive or active learning when there is insufficient annotation, which is typically the case in medical images. To start with, we go on to the automated fast detection and segmentation from MR images. Now, the magnetic resonance images are typically used in the brain imaging because this provides a better contrast of soft tissue structures, and it does not involve any exposure to radiation. Now, GBM is the full form is glioblastoma multiforme. It's the most dangerous of brain tumors, where invasive tumor biopsies, which are the gold standard, of course, so that is very challenging. And so the objective is to find some non-invasive MRI, if that imaging can be routinely used in diagnosis and prognosis and management of the disease. Now, there are different MR imaging sequences which are sensitive to different tumor physiology, such as blood flow, cellular density, and you need to distinguish between various regions of the tumor. So it is found that if you can incorporate all the knowledge from all the sequences, it would give a better match. So the four basic sequences used are T1, contrast enhanced T1, T2, and FLAIR. Now, if you look at the images you see on the table, you see in FLAIR you can get the tumor region marked out very well, and the edema region is also distinguishable. So the FLAIR sequence looks pretty good, but the objective here is to segment the different subparts of the tumor. So we believe that taking all the sequences together, as you see here, the color marked tumor region, and when you superimpose them with all the four sequences, you see that the different subparts stand out. Now, in brain tumors, you can have two grades, high grade and low grade. Obviously, the low grade is less dangerous and the survival is better. So it is very essential that you're able to distinguish between the two. And to the naked human eye, if you look at this picture, it is obvious that it is very, very difficult to distinguish between the high grade and the low grade. So with that in mind, we thought that if some kind of automated analysis using the image information could be useful. So the first approach was to use saliency towards fast localization and detection of the tumor. So what is saliency? Visual saliency is a distinct perceptual quality which detects some regions in the scene which stand out and grab our attention. For example, here, obviously in this natural scene, the bird stands out. So human eye fixations are indicative of bottom-up visual attention. So we thought, as the radiologist looks at the image, some kind of saliency concept plays a role. So we try to implement it in the code. So these are some of the factors affecting visual saliency. See a color popping out, the orientation popping out, the curvature popping out, texture popping out, a local pop out, or conjunction in the sea of disjunctions. So this first attempt was the saliency model. We mapped the image into a pseudo color space of RGB for better visualization, and then this was mapped back to L star, A star, B star, because that is more amenable to the human visual system. And from that, the saliency map was extracted. So this served for the fast detection. So this is the RGB MRI format, the pseudo color extension projection. So the T1 contrast, T2 and FLAIR, they were mapped to RGB in different combinations. This was then mapped back to L star, A star, B star. And if you look at the color cubes, the amplitude of the different colors, you see that the core, the tumor core and the edema in these two, the first and the second, they stand out, they are distinguishable. And the amplitude of the color was higher for these two important regions. So we inferred that any of these two could be used. However, we chose to focus on the first combination, that is ABC mapped to L star, A star, B star. So this is some little mathematics. So the image of size m by n was first transformed into size w by w, and then it was decomposed into several non-overlapping patches of smaller size k by k, and this was the center of the different components. And then we computed the color distance of each patch from each other. And to this computation, we introduced the distance between the patches. Now, the premise was that the neighboring regions of a salient one are also likely to be salient, such that a lower value of D means a higher effective value of S, or the saliency. So, introducing this distance component to the saliency computation, then we adopted this property of human visual attention, focusing into our model through evaluation of multiple scale images. So when an observer views a far off scene, the focus lies on the global object perspective. However, when the same scene is viewed at a closer range, the user tends to the viewer tends to pay more attention to the details within the salient region. So we thought that multi-scale information would be more useful. So with that in mind, so this is a saliency map of the pseudo-colored image at different scales with different patch sizes. So gradually you see the perspective shifts from the local to the global viewpoint. So we modified the mathematics with this factor. So this is about this is incorporating the multi-scale information, and thereafter the final saliency map was obtained by superimposing the multiple saliency maps at different resolutions. Finally, a mean filtering was applied to smoothen the saliency map to help focus on the core region. So that was the first detection, and then the proto-object was detected by using a dynamic threshold based on the image. So this is some sample results in 2D. So this was the ground truth, and this was the proto-object which was extracted. This was the quantitative analysis in terms of precision recall and ROC curves. In case of multiple tumors in the same region, if there were disjoint regions, the algorithm could perform. This was the algorithm, the automated GROW-CUT, and comparing with the ground truth, it was pretty good. Then we extended this to volumetric analysis. So then using the different slices encompassing the 3 sequences. So here the saliency map, the 3D proto object was extracted from it using the adaptive threshold. Then the foreground seed region was computed by shrinking the size of the proto object using morphological erosion, and the background seed pixels were generated from the proto object by the morphological dilation operation using a pair of radii. So this is the final 3D label map used for automated segmentation. So by the algorithm, this is the volumetric tumor region, and along the 3 planes, the axial, sagittal, and the coronal planes. Okay. So the computation was in terms of accuracy computed as the DICE index, and the reliability and robustness, that is evaluation of the segmentation as observed by different users. So the coefficient of variation CV was used for that purpose, and the resultant segmentation with some comparative study. And this was the coefficient of variation studied for the automated GROW-CUT and the semi-automated GROW-CUT over the high-grade tumor. This is some of the qualitative result of sample images and the kind of extraction we could achieve. So after that, so that was about the fast detection and localization. Now we need to get the delineation with as low user interaction as possible. So here we used a single seed only, so a single user input to segment the tumor. So the objective was to develop a tumor delineation method which is applicable in case of medical images, efficient in terms of computational time, accuracy is comparable to manual segmentation, and requires minimum user interaction. Now, multi-level thresholding requires exhaustive computations, so to determine the optimal set of thresholds. So for example, in an L gray level image with M classes, an exhaustive search needs L-1 CM computationals required for computing the threshold. So you have a huge computational overhead order of L raised to M, which is typically found in multi-level Otsu. Otsu's algorithm in bi-level thresholding typically decides a particular threshold T and separates into the two classes among the gray levels. Now in multi-level thresholding, you would need M-1 threshold values to get the M classes. So here the computational complexity, as discussed in the previous slide, is order of L raised to M, which is significantly high, particularly in real life large data. So we chose to incorporate an algorithm which is the discrete curve evolution. It is a meta-heuristic optimization technique typically used in skeleton pruning in images. So we transformed it towards segmentation. So now a digital curve P can be represented by a set of vertices, and there are a set of line segments joining these pairs of vertices such that the consecutive line segments join the consecutive vertices. Now for each pair of consecutive line segments, the cost is calculated in terms of the cosine of the angle between the two line segments, in addition to the lengths. Now this cosine factor is dependent on the slope, where the slope of the intersection, how the two segments meet. So if there is a peak or a valley, the cost would be high because the corner would be very pointed. So the objective was we needed to converge to the number of optimal threshold values. So that corresponded to the peak or the valley. So we wanted to merge the non-peak, non-valley segments first. So gradually we merged the pair of line segments with minimum cost. So this is a toy video showing how it works. So you see, these are the pairs of line segments. These are the pairs of these are all the vertices and the pairs of line segments, consecutive line segments, which have the minimum cost are getting merged continuously. Ultimately, if you provide a threshold value of, let's say we want 3 thresholds, then we put n as 3 and it will stop at those 3 highest cost thresholds. So this was something that happened in case of n equal to 3. So here we provide a map of, see, the green ones are the significant points that our algorithm detected, and the red one was what multi-level Otsu detected. Of course, multi-level Otsu is a gold standard, but the computational complexity is high. So now what we want to do is to tune the multiple thresholds obtained at a lower cost. So what we did was each interval by DCE was then further processed using bi-level Otsu, because bi-level Otsu had a lower cost. So then after using the bi-level Otsu on the DCE generated thresholds, this is how the thresholds looked. So they are very close to each other. They match pretty well, and the computational complexity is quite low, because here in our case we had order of L square times M for the M classes, and order of L for the DCE based algorithm. So order of L plus for the bi-level Otsu, it's order of L square for each of the pair of classes. So the total was order of L square compared to order of L raised to M. So that was the gain. So this is the flowchart showcasing the flow of functions. So first you consider the number of classes you want to get, then you generate the intervals using DCE, generate the local thresholds for each interval, using bi-level Otsu's method. So that is the refinement, and you generated the segmented images corresponding to each threshold. Then you select a point within the region of interest you want to work with, and then extract the ROI using connected component analysis. Then some morphological operation of hole filling is done to extract the ROI. Now here also we experimented with multiple tumors, disjoint regions. So here you would need a pair of user supplied seed points, because one seed point for each region. So these were the supplied seed points, and this was how the segmentation was. Subsequently, this was also extended to the volumetric phase, and so we used this algorithm for extracting the different sub volumes of the different regions, so enhancing core, necrosis, edema, and the match with the ground truth was pretty good. Also quantitatively in terms of dice, sensitivity, Hausdorff, distance, and standard deviation is marked on the box plots. So with that, let's move on to the deep learning applications. Now, radiomix is a term which is used in medical imaging, and we need to incorporate AI. So what is radiomix? It involves an interdisciplinary study of machine learning, deep learning, medical image processing and analysis, and computer vision. In our lab, we've been working on radiomix, machine learning, deep learning for several years. So we've been working on analyzing the deep networks, the deep convolutional networks, and finding out some kind of explainability in terms of the connectivity. Then we've also worked on the chest images, COVID, and on diabetic retinopathy, because this is a major problem in India, because India is supposed to be the capital of diabetes, and this is an irreversible eye problem associated with it. And we also worked on brain tumors and lung CT images. Now, radiomix is some kind of quantitative imaging features, high volume, high throughput quantitative imaging features which are extracted from the images and which are very much amenable to computer processing in the big data framework. So what we try to do in this study, that was in a collaboration with the University of Maastricht. So we tried to find out that the semi-automatic extraction was as good as the manual extraction. So in this, we used radiomic features, and the inter-observer variability was studied to find out the robustness of the features. So we extracted 56 CT 3D radiomic features made by 3 independent observers twice, and compared them to the features extracted from the manual delineations provided by 5 independent physicians. So we had 56 3D radiomic features in terms of tumor intensity, shape, texture. And the reproducibility of these features was also studied, and it was concluded that the semi-automated extraction of features was as good as the manual extraction, whereas we were able to bypass the human errors, particularly in processing high volume data. Now, computational intelligence, soft computing, natural computing, all these have got multiple roles in segmentation, in feature extraction, classification, clustering, and so on. So, artificial intelligence is a program that can sense, reason, act, and adapt. A subset of it is machine learning, which includes deep learning. Now, traditional machine learning is shallow learning, whereas deep learning involves deeper networks, and the explainability suffers, because as you go deeper and deeper, although the performance is found to be as good as human users, the research on explainability is in full swing. So this is a conventional neural network. If you look at the connectivity, this was large enough. And then when you move to the convolutional neural network, which is a very well-known version of this deep network and very popular. So you see the connectivity has increased. So you need huge amount of processing and fast processing. So you need typically GPUs and you need a lot of data. And in medical images, obviously data is not that high in many cases. So you need to get some kind of other ways to bypass this problem. And for that, you need annotated data, which is very difficult to find because annotated data is expensive. You need medical experts to contribute towards that. And obviously, medical experts are too busy to often provide the annotation for research. So we need some kind of active learning or interactive learning whereby this can be circumvented to a certain extent. So shallow classifiers, or in traditional machine learning, you need a good feature extractor, good radiomic feature extractors. And it produces representations that are selective to aspects of the image, and they're important for discrimination. You need the handcrafted features, so you need considerable engineering skills and expertise. So the key advantage of deep learning lies in automatically learning the features. So the deep models extract the features on their own. You do not need the expert to provide the handcrafted features. So that is a great advantage. However, you need some kind of annotation when you want to perform tasks like segmentation or classification. In convolutional networks, typically the basic building blocks, as you all know, are convolutional layers, pooling layers, and the fully connected layers. So the convolutional layer serves as the feature extractor. It does it on its own, and you don't need the handcrafted features. Sometimes, of course, the handcrafted features are added at the output layer to provide improved performance. And the pooling layers perform some kind of downsampling, and the fully connected layers at the outside. And you've got some other layers like batch normalization, dropout, max out, which are typically used for regularization. We don't go into the details of the CNNs in this talk. So let's move on to some of the applications of deep learning that we have processed in our study. So the first one was presented in the MICCAI conference. And it was on the detection and classification. So the data set was based on the BRATS challenge data set and the TCIA. And there were high-grade and low-grade glioma cases, and the 4 components T1, T1 contrast enhanced, T2, and FLAIR. So we used, in this particular work, we used 3 models. One was patch-based, the other was slice-based, the other was multiplanar or some kind of volumetric in 3D. So we transformed the detection of the tumor and classification was made, and then the classification was made into the low and high grade. So we also compared with 2 state-of-the-art architectures of convolutional nets like VGGNet and ResNet using transfer learning. So this is the 3-level architecture that we use: the patch net, the slice net, and the volume net. And this was about the fine-tuning of the VGGNet and the ResNet that we performed. So the final layer was last fully connected layer was just replaced and pre-trained of the pre-trained network. And we used the leave one patient out test scheme. These were the parameters used. A small part of the training set was used for validating, and the efficiency was measured in terms of accuracy and the F1 score. So the quantitative evaluation showed that the 3D representation in the volume net was able to perform better. This was some comparison with standard machine learning like k-nearest neighbor, decision tree, support vector, machine, multi-layer perceptron, logistic regression, naive Bayes, and then VGGNet, ResNet, and the 3 models. And the VGGNet was providing the highest score. This was about the visualization of the intermediate layers, and we found that some of the typical features were taking shape as we went up the maps, the feature maps of the different layers. This was about the quantitative evaluation in terms of sensitivity, specificity, and accuracy, and the testing results on the holdout data, the confusion matrix. Then finally we extended it to the multiplanar spatial coordinate. The spatial coordinate was our contribution in this particular presentation in that challenge, the MICCAI challenge, and it got a good score, and it was among the highly ranked top performing methods according to the leaderboard score. So what we did was, conventionally the UNet is very popular and very well known in segmentation. So what it does is it has a contracting or downsampling path. There's a bottleneck here, and then the expanding or upsampling path. There is a skip connection between the downsampling path and the upsampling path. So this provides this passes some of the local information to the global information during upsampling for improved performance, and there is end-to-end training. Now, what we found was during the downsampling or the pooling operation, the network loses some spatial information, and the upsampling in the decoder network tries to approximate it through interpolation. So this causes some error at the boundary, and such error at the boundary is not acceptable in medical imaging, because the doctor needs to know the exact pattern of the tumor for the operation. So we found that this kind of ambiguities do exist at the edges when we use the UNet. So to overcome this issue, what we did was we introduced a novel spatial max pooling layer, whereby the maximum locations were subsequently passed on and stored so that they could be used during the unpooling operation at the decoder through the spatial max unpooling layer. So the data set and the overall survival data was provided by the organizers of the BRATS 18 challenge. It consisted of 210 samples of high grade and 75 samples of low grade glioma cases. You see that for a deep learning framework, this is pretty small. So it was a very difficult problem. So once you train your network in these challenges, the organizers present you with the validation data set, which was previously unseen. So these were the 66 combined cases on which you need to show how the system runs. So the algorithm cannot be changed any further, so you need to provide the output. So based on that, the leaderboard score is prepared. So the overall survival data had 163 patients, and this was about the image size, and this was about the different segmentation regions in the different sequences used. So you've got the enhancing core, the necrosis, and the actual core of the tumor. So this was our algorithm actually. So what we did was we preserved the maximum location, here 0.9, here 1.8, and here 0.7, and here 0.5. So this location, this additional information gave a better modeling at the boundaries. So what we observed was the key issues were the segmentation error around the boundary and the issue of false positives. So these are the two major issues in medical imaging. So for that, the error around the boundary, as I said earlier, was solved by the spatial max pooling and unpooling with the skip connections providing some local information. about the maximum location. The solution of the false positive error, we use the multiplanar representation along the axial, coronal and sagittal planes, and then we trained the 3 models in the planes and then combined using a consensus fusion strategy to produce a better volumetric segmentation. Then class imbalance is another major issue, because in medical problems typically there is class imbalance. If you look at healthy samples and diseased samples, obviously the number of healthy samples of the background region is the normal situation is higher. And in case of medical images, the disparity is even more obvious, because the background region has the maximum number of pixels and the actual tumor region has the minimum number of pixels. So this kind of class imbalance causes a huge problem in correct segmentation and classification. So we introduced 2 losses, the generalized dice loss and the weighted log loss, to overcome this thing in the deep learning framework. So we developed this using TensorFlow in Python on Intel AI Dev Cloud, because this work was done with on Intel collaboration. So we used their framework, and then this is the comparative study in terms of mean dice score with other state-of-the-art methods on the test data. This is the box and whisker plot of segmentation accuracy for the 2 grades of the tumor. This is the BRATS leaderboard score of 2018. So this was our method, and the top 3 scores are marked in red, green and blue colors. So compared to the top performing methods, ours was significantly good. And this is for the different sub-regions individually, the enhancing tumor, the whole tumor and the tumor core in each case, in terms of dice, sensitivity, specificity and Hausdorff distance. Next was the overall survival case. In this case, the data was the challenge. Organizers provided us with separate data, and the data was too small to use any kind of deep learning. So we used the standard machine learning with radiomic features. So the features used were basically first order gray level statistics, geometric shapes, gray level co-occurrence matrix and run length matrix. So we had 296 quantitative radiomic features which were extracted from the segmented tumor volume, and the classes of the survivors as provided by the organizers was 3 short survivors, long survivors, less than 10 months and greater than 15 months, and in between was the mid survivors. So these are the representation of these different radiomic features that we extracted here using standard machine learning, and this was the output in terms of dice score, sensitivity, specificity and Hausdorff for the segmentation. And this is the qualitative study on the segmentation, showing out the different tumor regions. And this is about the validation phase of segmentation study, and this is the validation phase for survival. And finally, I give you a brief overview. Actually, this was published in SSCI 2020. So this was a small application we made to screening of COVID-19 using chest X-ray images. So sample X-ray images of COVID-19 and pneumonia. Now the data set is particularly limited in the public domain, and unless you are in collaboration with real data from the hospitals, it is difficult to get large amount of data, and that is a huge problem in deep learning. So this data was obtained from the publicly available data set. So what we used was the NIH chest X-ray data set, the dataset A, and the dataset B was acquired from 4 open source databases. So the Italian Society of Medical Radiology, Radiopedia by Dr. Fabio Macori and J. Paul Cohen, and from a hospital in Spain. All these were publicly available. So what we did was, because of the limitation of data, we used domain adaptation algorithm. We introduced that. So we trained on this data A, and then we predicted on the data B. And surprisingly, the performance was pretty good. So this is domain extension transfer learning. So we train the CNN model from scratch on data A to classify just between the two classes, diseased and normal X-ray. Then we replace the last fully connected layer and train the CNN with the new fully connected layer with 4 classes from the 4 data sets taken together. So normal, other disease, pneumonia, and COVID-19. So the rest of the weights in the previous layers were the same. Now, the evaluation was made on dataset B such that the dataset A was a subset of dataset B because it had only 2 of the 4 classes which were used for testing. So this was the result using VGGNet and ResNet and the AlexNet. And these models were initially trained from scratch using data A. Then on data B, using domain adaptation, transfer learning, we used the 4 classes, and this was the confusion matrix, and it worked very well. So this is the gradient class activation map visualization of the images for COVID-19, pneumonia, the normal case, and this was for the other diseases, all clubbed together. And then we also participated in this hackathon, and we got a good position. We were 4th on the public leaderboard in 1 day's notice. So with that, let me conclude today's webinar. So let us recapitulate. So first, I introduced some typical machine learning approaches we had taken using saliency and single seed thresholding in terms of DCE for the fast localization, detection, and segmentation of the tumor in brain images. Then, with a brief introduction to radiomics and deep learning, we moved on to some of the applications that we have performed in deep learning and participated in the MICAI challenge using for detection and classification and segmentation and survival prediction. And finally, some application to the screening of COVID-19. So with that, I thank you for your patience, and I'm ready to take your questions. Thank you, Sansani.
Hi, thank you, Sumishta. If anybody has a question, you can write in the question box, and I will ask this for you. And nobody hasn't asked any questions yet. So my question is that when you use a deep learning algorithm on the medical data, and the medical data, normally medical data only have like a small sample size, right?
Yes.
So do you need to do the augmented data set also, right? So is that gonna, do you think that is that gonna create any problem on the generalization of the CNN?
See, what we do typically is extract patches, and so if you extract patches, that automatically augments the data. And one issue is that you need the annotation from the medical expert. So sometimes in certain cases it does create problems, but again, it is also the only possible way to overcome it, obviously.
Okay. The question from the audience is that the first question is, what is the difference between spatial max pooling and pooling index in SegNet?
Sorry?
The question from Vaishanan is, he asking is, what is the difference between spatial max pooling and pooling indices in SegNet?
No, here we are passing the maximum location only. So it is the maximum location is passed, and the actual value of the maximum location is also passed. So that provides some additional information.
So So do they have any different if you use spatial max pooling or?
We did not, because at that time SegNet was not there and we did not use the SegNet. So that comparison
Okay.
hasn't been done. Okay.
Okay. So you don't know, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And someone asking if they can get a slide. You can send me the PDF of the slide and then I can post it.
I think you have recorded, yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And another question is, can this algorithm use in another part of the body like lung or liver?
Yes, of course. So the thing is, but the medical technology used for getting the images is very different. So this is not like in natural scenes. That is the main problem. In natural scenes, you use the same kind of cameras, but for the medical images for different parts of the body, you use different medical technology based on the convenience of distinguishing between the different regions or different tissues. So the brain tissue or the nervous system tissue is more amenable to magnetic resonance imaging, whereas lung tissues are more amenable to CT. So now we need to do that transformation from MRI to CT. So that depends on the local particulars related to the medical imaging technology. So once that is performed, obviously this algorithm can be used. But it's not just like in natural scenes that I take some images of trees and it is transferable to the sea or the desert. It's not that easy, but of course it is possible.
Yeah, I think so too. Another question is the accuracy obtained. How can one ensure that the deep learning algorithm is not producing so randomly? In other words, if random pixels are labeled as disease, what would be DICE score?
No, but it will be the DICE score is based on matching the predicted and the ground truth. So it will give a measure of obviously where there is mismatch. So there can be error, but this is the most commonly used metric to evaluate the goodness of the segmentation. So how good the two segmentations match. So there will be mismatch in which region. So for that you need the validation by the medical expert, obviously. So without a medical expert, domain expert, any research on the biological aspects is never valid. So DICE index after all is a quantitative measure. You can get 100% accuracy or 98% accuracy, but that doesn't give any meaning until the domain expert confirms it, because it's a meaning involved.
Okay, yes. And the next question is that sometimes COVID-19 is combined with pneumonia. Do you know what your solution design in such case? So can you differentiate the two?
See, we tried on, so that is the major question, a major issue, obviously, because using just X-rays is not a conclusive solution. But at that point of time, given the limitation of data, we at that point of time, you see, there were a lot of groups working on how it could be solved. So we also used it for the X-ray problem. And if you observe, our training set was two class, the normal and the diseased. And in the testing set, we had the different categories of images. So the output was good. as we observed from those 4 publicly available data sets. Now, in real life, the things are obviously not that easy, because you see there are these cases of COVID-19 which do not exhibit any symptoms, the asymptomatic cases. So then how do you detect? Obviously, you cannot detect COVID-19 in such situations. So all these are based on incomplete knowledge we have about COVID-19. And as days go by, our knowledge is getting more and more supplemented. And that is the uncertainty in medical image problems or medical problems. And that's why that is the way learning can be used to overcome some of these issues. And as days go by, we will get more and more knowledge, and the models will become improved.
Yeah. Next question is for detection is concerned, which hardware is required for embedded system?
Sorry, I cannot understand.
I think he asking about building a embedded system for the detection.
Oh yeah,
In this case.
we did not do that. But of course, then if you want to embed deep learning framework, maybe that would be difficult. You need to do some kind of approximation, the computational complexity of such a huge framework. So in embedded systems, definitely that would be the more practical situation. So we need to work on that. I haven't worked on that aspect.
Yeah, I think it's going to be hard because the computational complexity is too high. Yeah.
So these days you've got this mobile net, you know, that is for working on at a lower computational complexity. So obviously there will be good schemes coming up.
Okay. Okay. Next question is that how do you deal with the viability of the physician in the training of the machine learning models?
Viability, I mean availability.
Yeah, I mean,
availability.
I think what he's asking is that the physician there are several types of physicians. So how do you deal with them in order to train the machine learning model? I guess that's what his question.
Oh, if you have the annotated data set, then you don't need the physician for the training, because the annotation is done one time by the physician. In this case, in the medical images, let's say you want to do segmentation. So once the the annotated images are provided by the physician, then the system can try to learn whatever the annotation or the ground truth is. So you don't need, so when there is an unknown case arriving, you want to predict what it is, then you need the physician's ultimate consensus.
Yeah. And see, I don't think there is any. Okay. Can you provide the participation? I mean, image detection dedicated hardware that you require. This is the hardware part.
Yes,
the one
yes.
he asking about the embedded system. I mean,
yeah, but embedded systems
he asking that.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. I think what he asking is that is there any specific hardware that we need in order to do this? That's what I think that's what his question is.
I haven't used embedded systems. I cannot comment on this. I'm sorry. So we use GPU, and without GPU, we thought it was a very difficult problem indeed for large data. It's very much time consuming. So now we are currently working on mobile net, but not on embedded systems.
Yes. I think that is all of the question. And Shumita, do you think if you can give me the slide later so that I can post it to the audience?
Oh, okay, I will share it with.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sumishta.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, for coming to give us our webinar, a nice webinar. And thank you so much for the audience who are staying with us. And we will have a next webinar in 4th of March on how to publish in TFS. So if anyone interested, you can register for that. So for today, I'm just gonna end the webinar now. And thank you so much, everyone, and especially to you, Professor Shumita Mita.
It was my honor. I thank you for having invited me. So have a good day.
Good day. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
So